Well, in its cover story this week, Finweek looks at whether it is possible to make R1 million in 5 years or less. Well, the good news that it is, and joining me in studio to help us unpack this, or rather find out how we can do this, is Ben Smit, who's an entrepreneurial strategy guide at Raizcorp, Alexander Babich, who's the CEO of Alexander Babich and Associates, and Chris Bischoff, who's the co-founder of Burn. Gentlemen, thank you for making the time to join us. Chris, let me start with you because you wrote this article. The big question: how can we make R1 million in 5 years or less?
Well, when I started writing this article, I thought maybe this is the last article I ever have to write. I was actually secretly hoping that these gentlemen could give me a few tips to do that. It turns out it is possible in 5 years or less, but it requires a bit of commitment. It's, you know, there are a lot of things in the market that work in your favor if you are disciplined and if you know what you want. And what I found interesting when I wrote the article is that the first step is you actually have to ask yourself if you want this and why you want this. Like, wanting R1 million for the sake of wanting R1 million is not enough, doesn't provide enough motivation to get you there. So you have to know that I want R1 million because I want to, you know, go on a world trip or get plastic surgery or whatever it is that you want to do with R1 million. And then having that motivation helps to get you to the point where you want to get. So it is possible.
It's possible. I'm going to start with you, Alexander, because you said something very interesting before we went on air. You work with financial planning, and you gave a very practical way in which you can do this. You said if we have R1,000 per month for 20 years at a 10% interest, we can do it.
Yeah, you certainly can. If you do the calculations and you can go into the internet, there's lots of applications one can do. But look, you wanted to do it in 5 years, but the truth of it is most of it's going to take us a lifetime. And the miracle of both our guests agree, Ben and Chris agree, and Christia, is you've got to have compound interest working for you. That's the miracle. So basically, just to give the viewers a sort of a bit of insight, if we were to take R1,000 every single month, put it into a savings account, maybe a unit trust or shares Ben and Chris and I were discussing, and you compounded that over a 20-year period, you would come up with just over R1 million. Of course, that's assuming things like inflation have got to be factored in. I've assumed inflation at 6%, which it apparently is, if the ministers to be believed, and of course that we've got growth of say 10%, which Ben might allude to. It's about, yeah, you need to be in shares and property to achieve those type of growth rates. But yes, it is achievable. About 20 years it was going to take you, but just think of it as like a snowball in Warren Buffett's book. It's like a snowball gaining, as the snowball rolls down the hill, it gathers more snow. That's exactly how compound interest works. It's the miracle that it's possible to do it.
I think what is difficult for people is that people don't always understand how to do it.
Yes.
So you hear about shares and it seems daunting, you know, as a person who doesn't come from that background, how do you actually do it? And what I found encouraging is simple products like ETF products and, you know, the top 40s and that sort of things that you can actually as an individual buy online. And you can start seeing your money grow, and I think that's what's sort of encouraging about this article is that it doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to understand the principles of, you know, investing offshore and complicated things. You can actually do it just, you know, with simple, easy to use products.
Before I come to you, Ben, I'm going to speak with Chris briefly. Chris, you've decided to go the entrepreneurial route. That's quite a risky route to do. So if you're very risk averse, is this not the route to go if you're wanting to make millions?
Well, I mean, I went the entrepreneurial route because I was naive and young enough to actually do it. I didn't have children or anything to actually worry about. So I sort of, you know, took a blind leap of faith forward and went with my brother, and we both essentially quit our jobs and started working in the company. I can't imagine doing it any other way, just because this is the way that I've actually gone forward with it. But I think that if you don't have the responsibilities of family and that sort of thing, and you actually have the opportunity to be able to take certain risks, and it's something that going the entrepreneurial route really is one of the easier ways to actually go to sort of make $1 million in 5 years or less.
Ben, you look at strategy. How else can a person do it?
Well, I think both Alex and Chris and Christia have mentioned some very valid points. One of the main things at Raizcorp, we have in excess of 400 entrepreneurial companies that we basically try and help build their businesses up. But one thing that we certainly find lacking is planning. So it really is defining the scope of your objectives. And really, as Christy alluded to, money is really just the perception you have of what it can do for you. So really define, what you want it to do for you at the end. Draw pictures if need be, define the goal as smartly as you can, be specific, have measurable outcomes that you can track, where you can track your progress along the way as well. Make them realistic. A lot of times you find, an entrepreneur, an internet entrepreneur, for instance, his aspiration is to be, the next Bill Gates in 5 years, which is unfortunately not realistic.
They spent the money before they
have spent the money, yeah. So and have a time frame, so work within a time frame if you can, and then have certain sort of KPIs, success or factors along the way that you can say, right, I've hit these milestones, because a lot of times the goals are so ambitious that they really need to be chunked down into more palatable bite-sized bits. So, and then another big thing is commit, and Chris definitely said that, they in for a penny, in for a pound. A lot of guys, we're going to try this, if it doesn't work that, we're going to try this, and at the end there's a real lack of focus. So, commit to the strategy. It takes time to implement and execute and really stick to your plan.
What also struck me is that you need money to make money. So let's talk a little bit about startup capital, or the amount of money you have to have a job, or you have to have some form of income, rich parents or whatever it is that you've got going on for you, to make this happen. So maybe start with you guys. Like, how much startup capital did you need?
No, I wish. Really, when Nick and I started, obviously because, like I said, we didn't have many responsibilities and stuff, so I had the ability to actually go and have this sort of blind faith that our idea would actually work. I think our startup capital for Burn was about 20,000 Rand that we started off with. We had enough to have a small salary for him and I to actually go for, I think it was 3 months worth of things. If we didn't have anything coming in. We operated out of his kitchen for the first year or so. Instead of taking a 13th check from my company that I was leaving, or a retention package, I actually took the computer that I was working on, and I thought that it gets us out of having to buy another computer and that sort of thing. And we really started as an absolute bare bones bootstrap business. I think that maybe going and starting with a large sum of capital to make more money would have actually hindered us in a lot of ways, because we would have been sort of more risk averse to actually be able to, if you're dealing with somebody else's money, you sort of have to, you can't take certain leaps and challenges and that sort of thing, and you hold back in certain things. One of the examples I can give is we were competing against people that were doing hand-drawn illustrations, and we were doing digital illustrations, and basically we then bought a large format printer to be able to give our clients an actual physical product. Now, that was a 40,000 Rand printer that we didn't really have the money for, but we because we weren't dealing with someone else's money, it was our sort of thing, our sweat and blood. We said, yes, we can now do this. We've made the decision, we're going to go and buy this printer. And that sort of elevated us a little bit more in the business. So I think it can go either ways. Obviously, I would have loved to have had very, very wealthy parents to sort of pay my way through, but I think in not having that, it sort of edged us on forward in a way that would have actually held us back if we were dealing with other people's money and other people's investments in our company.
Ben, what do you see from Raizcorp's side?
Yes.
How much startup capital do people normally need?
Most of our companies, I would say, that joined Raizcorp started with no startup capital, or an extremely, extremely small amount. So. And we try and emphasize that, and it's exactly sort of, if it can be surmised, what Chris is saying, it's resources. So what resources do you have? Most people see a resource only in monetary terms, and that really isn't the truth. A cell phone is a resource. We find networks of people are incredible resources. So in the entrepreneurial space in South Africa, we find there's a massive funding gap. So they don't fit the traditional risk profile. So funding is really, really tough. So if the guys start off with a bit of funding, it's normally from family or friends, feel bad or guilty, or they take a punt on this company. But that's generally the way they start. But a lot of the companies really, and they are so incredibly innovative, using things around them that you will never kind of think as a resource that they utilize to start their businesses. Mm.
Alexander, can you make money without money? You said one should never rely on their salary. How else can you do it?
Well, first of all, to get money is difficult, okay. It's like the weather. The banks lend you money when it's sunshine, and they take the brolly away when it's raining, and there's a lot of rain out there. So there's limited capital for these people. How do you tie these two up? Ben's alluded to a very important thing. Networking is exceptionally important. For example, you raised your money on the internet.
Yes,
And crowdfunding, that's a fantastic way of getting money. It puts lots of little bits of money, can give you a lot of money to get you going. But the truth is capital is scarce and banks are risk averse. So it's generally the type of people that they're seeing have taken risk and have got a certain idea that they need to implement. But if they don't have a plan ahead, it's like building a house. If you don't have an architect designing your house, it's probably going to fall down. And the statistics are very high for entrepreneurs failing, unfortunately. That's why people like the comfort of buying listed shares, well-known, successful people. You know, look at Bidvest with Brian Joffe, people buy that. You look at Koos Becker with Naspers. Those are shares that are listed and do well. Of course, Naspers is a good example of where you want to know how entrepreneurs have made money. A lot of them have made money on the internet. You look at Facebook and you look at WhatsApp and all those applications. If you go and Google the millionaires made today, they tend to be in these type of applications. But the truth of the matter, for the vast majority of people sitting out there, they're never going to have the entrepreneurial flair. They probably won't have access to the capital, and the banks are probably not going to lend the money. I think what your article is trying to say is, how do you change that? And for most people, it's going to be that 1,000 Rand every month, maybe washing a car, I don't know, selling burgers on the side of the road, whatever they have to do. But if you're spending more than you're earning, you're gone. And that's the biggest problem in this country. People are borrowing more than they have, and this is putting us into a poverty cycle.
But what do you do if you want to, so say I want to make a lot of money, I want to be an entrepreneur, but I don't have an idea. I mean, not everybody is, you could have the pluck to do it, but maybe you just don't have a good idea. What do you do then?
Find someone who does have a good idea. I think you sort of have to then, you have to know what, you have to be bringing something to the table. You can't just say that I've got the gumption to do it and I need somebody else's idea and somebody else's money to do it, because then you're not actually bringing anything to the table. So I think that you need to either be bringing sort of financial support, contacts, something to somebody else's idea, and then grow together as a business like that. Yeah.
Ben, let's talk about passive income, because that's one of the things that has been mentioned. A lot of wealthy people say, you know what, if you want to have financial freedom, if you want to get rich, you must have a passive income stream. Tell us a bit more about that. How can the average person start to have access to passive income?
Passive income, it's hugely beneficial if you can get to a point where you achieve that. Passive income can take many forms. Alex alluded to shares, for instance, so dividend payouts from shares, yearly dividend payouts. If you have a property portfolio, rental portfolio, that's sort of, it's basically income that you create without having to do the physical work on a continuous basis. So it's a difficult place to get to a sustainable residual income when your capital base isn't particularly large. If you've got 100 million Rand invested in stocks or in property, then it's quite easy. But to get to that point is quite difficult. So it's something I think everyone aspires to, but I think a very small percentage of people actually get to that point. To be quite honest, most of us kind of need to slog away till we're around about 60 to be able to say, our retirement funds are enough for us to then kind of sit back and have a residual income that supports our lifestyle. So a very, very difficult thing to get to, I think.
Alex, if you have your money invested, I've put away 17,000 Rand every month for 5 years, and now I'm a cash millionaire. What do I do now with that money? How do I make that money work for me?
That's always the big question, isn't it? You've either got to take that money, because whatever like Maynard Keynes, the economist, said, whatever you make with your own two hands is yours, and everything else that's given to you is a gift, right?
Yes, yeah.
So once you've got the gift and you've got that money in your hands, where can you go? And there are only really 4 asset classes, as we all know, or the viewers should know, and that is to put your money in a bank, which you generally get poorer because of inflation. The bank then lends it out to somebody else and they make more money. We won't talk about some of the banks. We then go to things like property, which is probably the most common one. Okay, but property has its hurdles as well. The National Credit Act has stifled people to be able to borrow, but property is the big asset class that most people aspire to own. Then, of course, you've got equities, which are listed and non-listed companies. In your case, you'll be a non-listed company. I'm going to be speaking very seriously to this man. He could be the next Zuckerberg, and then away we go with the next gaming app. Or I got hooked on Angry Birds the other day. Finally woken up to it, and love to have that. I see you got to buy 10 Rand app to get this and to get that.
I think there is like 16 billion or something was their last listing
insane.
or something. It's Rovio. It's
I want to get that big bomb to kill out there. You got to pay $10.
It's everybody paying 99 cents. Sort of
it
starts to add up a little bit.
Yeah. Anyway, that's the sort of thing that I can see working. And then, of course, bonds, which most people don't understand, but bonds are obviously debt instruments, and governments issue them. Of course, some bonds are better than others. If you happen to be Zimbabwe bonds, people weren't as attractive to buy those bonds, perhaps when they were in hyperinflation. I mean, we could all be millionaires here, couldn't we, if we had the Zimbabwe dollar a few years ago?
Alexander, you said we could all be millionaires. We are out of time. But before we close off, I just want to get one important point, one important trait that a person needs to have. So in one word, what do you need to have in order to be a millionaire? I'm going to start with you, Chris.
R1 million. I'm kidding. I think a big thing is sort of scratch your own itch, find a product that you actually really like or service that you really believe in, and move forward with it.
Alexander.
Honestly, it must start at the schools. That's what I wanted to say. It's got to start at an educational level at schools. Without that, this country is going nowhere.
Ben.
Determination/commitment. 2 words.
Yeah.
With a healthy dose of naivety.
That always helps, yeah.
Thank you so much for making the time to join us.